Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the level 2 recording of Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans, July 4th. Even though it's July 4th, some people are at barbecues, some people are at lasagna. So we're doing level 2 of the lasagna. Level 1 was all about building the dimensions, like math talk and developing the common vocabulary of being able to understand the 0th dimension and higher dimensional perception and what higher dimensional beings would look like to us, and also what the perspective of a higher dimensional being would be like. What if we achieve that perspective, what would the world look like from that viewpoint? So that's a pretty good segue into this idea of duality. And so the level 2 stuff, this is all about non-duality. When I share this flying rainbow lasagna shape with everyone, I say this is the embodiment or physical representation of non-duality. And let's define terms. What does that even mean? So first of all, you guys know I'm a visitor to this type of biological body. I'm new to it, and it actually took a long time to kind of get integrated and also understand how this body functioned. And I'll also tell you, if I at first condescended and thought that this body was like simplistic in any way, the more that I learned about it and the more that I experienced it, the more that I recognized how miraculous and complex and sophisticated our biological structures are. So let me never sound like some kind of like interdimensional carpetbagger that's like, these bodies are so, what a church cumbersome or whatever. I'm really not that way at all. I'm like, wow, these bodies are pretty amazing. It's kind of like if you, found ancient farming techniques and you're like, hey, like these people actually knew what they were talking about. So, and when I entered into this physical body, I found that there was a lot of innate duality. That is just a basic part of the biological. It arises as a, what would we call it? An after effect or an artifact of the basic structure of the biological reality. So even if you're a cosmic traveler and you're not usually used to a dualistic perspective, just coming into this format of body means that you're going to experience some amount of dualism. And then also, what is happening in human society or, in Earth's surface society also is the exhibition of a lot of duality. So in terms of our eyes, so most people, the primary mode of perception is visual, and most people have 2 eyes and have binocular vision, eye 1 and eye 2. And we'll talk about different phenomenon of visual perception now. So one of the phenomena is that by making tiny, minute calculations, so that those calculations are done not only in our brain and in our neurology, but they are also done in our perception. And perception is independent of brain and neurology, because literally you can have brain damage, you can have surgical removal of parts of your brain, and there can still be perception. So consciousness is not part of neurology. Consciousness is contained within neurology, but if this is consciousness and this is neurology, you can still have consciousness even if neurology goes away. And that's what we would call like a supernatural residue of consciousness or an ascended master, blah, blah, blah. Our system of perception is independent of our brain and our neurology. So when we make these on the fly, incredibly complex calculations that we're doing all the time in order to create a sense of depth, what we're doing is comparing thing 1 to thing 2. So we have viewpoint 1 and viewpoint 2, and they're a little bit different. And what our mind and brain and perception does a comparison. Like this eye told me this, and this eye told me this, and there's this amount of difference between it. So therefore, I'm able to tell the lasagna is this far away. And if I go like this, then you can tell, oh, look, the position of that lasagna changed because now I'm able to see that it appears different. Oh, look, the position of that lasagna changed. And so mostly we explore this in infancy and early childhood. It's how we learn to use our eyes. I had this experience in adulthood. Like when I came here, literally, my eyesight had drastically reduced in terms of nearsightedness. And so like the world was to me like an infant looks at the world and it's very blurry and very amorphous. And that's what my first, couple of years of experience here were like. Then when I finally got corrective lenses, then I was able to understand and calibrate and see where objects were and how to navigate the world in that way. Like it's a big, it's a big step. It's a big learning process. So depth perception. And this also comes down to the question of observership. So in level 1, I was talking all about the French bread of reality. If you have a long, skinny French bread, that's a fourth dimensional line. And the French bread is baked in a bakery. The bakery is a fifth dimensional and higher bakery. And the oven or apparatus that takes the dough, the uncollapsed waveforms of possibilities of the fifth dimension and higher, and actually transforms it into the timeline, a linear set of edifices that we can walk into as embodied people. It is observership. So I wrote this silly little story a long time ago, pardon me, that is about these people that have ovens in front of their eyes, and that, like, imagine having like laser beams, like, you know, like a X-Men character, that everywhere you look, you've got laser beams, and that the world is actually made of dough, you know, like cake batter, this stuff that's not baked yet, it's not cooked, it's just like liquid. And yet these people didn't know that they were surrounded by all of this liquid, formless stuff, because everywhere they looked, they had ovens in front of their eyes, and they were constantly baking that liquid or potential for matter into actual matter. That's what you and I are doing all the time. Technically, when we look around, you look around my room, this is, you're like, Aurora, that is a room. I'm like, no, this is not a room. This is a sea of uncollapsed waveforms, potentials, possibilities, and probabilities. And your ovens in front of your eyes are making this appear to be a room. So those ovens include your system of interpretation. It's not just perception, because we all have eyeballs, and the eyeballs have, hey, good to see you, Christine. The eyeballs have, you know, stimulation, light waves are going into your eyeballs. It's not just about that, it's about interpretation. Like if I show you an optical illusion, you can interpret that line drawing in one way, or you can interpret it in another way. Like there's a bunch of these where it could be either an old woman or a young woman, or, you know, a giraffe or a crocodile. Like it's a line drawing. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, photons are stimulating your retina, but that's not all that's going on. What's also happening is each one of us has a filter, like a lens, a system of interpretation, where we take that raw information of stimulation and we then use it in order to build a narrative structure of reality. And we say, oh, that's a room. Aurora's sitting in a room. And this is what's going on in the room. And here's a thing hanging from the ceiling over here. Let me drink more water while I talk more about this. So up until the, let's say, 13 or 1400s, I'm talking about the invention of perspective. Before that time, in, you know, like the Renaissance in Western Europe, let's go to the whiteboard. And let me clear everything away, because it'll still be everything from before. Clearing everything away so we can start afresh. Let's say, you know, in the years BC and, you know, leading up to the Renaissance in Europe, if we had a flat canvas like this, it was looked at as a flat canvas. And if you drew a person's face in the middle here, like it was just that person's face. And it was not looked at like a place that had depth. In order to have a flat painting that all of a sudden looks like a room that has depth within it, what happened was something magical. That was the invention of perspective. I'm trying to focus and draw. It's a little bit challenging with this equipment. There we go. The invention of perspective, which was when artists started to use tools of the trade. This over here, this is an example of 1-point perspective. How about if I draw this over here? I do this all the time. So landscape, draw a little. Here's a horizon, here's a mountain, here's a sunshine in the background with sun's rays coming off of the sunshine. And then here's a road. And that road goes off into the distance. So I've just drawn a very slapdash version of a landscape. But because we are all acculturated to understand perspective as a sense of our tool for interpreting the world. When I show you this picture over here, you don't think like, wow, that's a Chinese hieroglyphic. You look at it and you say, oh, that's a road going off into the distance. And that's this is a horizon line in the background. It's because we've all been taught to understand perspective. But when perspective was first invented, it was magical, because it was like, wow, you have a flat painting, but it actually looks like a bowl of fruit, or it actually looks like a person sitting in a room. This was revolutionary. And so, you know, P.S., when people go to art school, they learn all of these tools of the trade. You paint a bowl of fruit in art school so you can learn, like, how do you make a thing look, how do you make it look like there's this actual thing there? You paint a apple or an orange because it's how you learn. Like, how do you make thing look round on something flat? And so the real answer here is that we, the viewer, are adding the additional dimension. We know that it's a flat piece of paper or a flat canvas. None of us are so foolish that we actually think like that you could reach in and actually like get the apple and actually eat it. We know that that's not true. We are adding that dimension by the way that we are looking at and interpreting that flat object. And as we go through this class more, we are all going to become experts at how we interpret time and how we interpret those layers of reality. Just like it was revolutionary when perspective was invented, and then eventually everyone became very blasé. Oh, that's just perspective. We know all about that. Now everybody learns it in art school, and it's very normal. And oh, wait. I know I drink a lot. When every time we look at a computer screen or at a TV, we are all culturally trained to understand that you don't just look at it like a flat thing. You look at it like you're looking through a window, right, Shiki? We're looking through a window. And so when we look at a painting or we look at a drawing, we're not just looking at it flat, we're looking at it as if it has depth. And we can contrast this with like some indigenous art that is not based in the perspective of Western Europe, like the indigenous people from Australia. And they make those dot paintings. The dot paintings are not mere abstractions. They are narratives and maps. However, they are not through the cultural filter or through the cultural lens of interpreting it as a three-dimensional space. Like you can even look in this little screen where you're seeing like, look, you see how there's that corner over there and there's that corner over there. And it looks like all of these lines are kind of going like slanty. That's perspective. And we're used to this now. It's become a part of our lexicon of perception. And if someone who is totally not from this culture is shown these aspects of artistry, it might take training that you might have to explain to them. Like, oh, like, see that? Like, that's a window. That's a window, that's a door, that's this form, and then eventually they'll come to understand. So that a big part of it is being, what I'm trying to get across is this idea that dualistic, what we're looking at, I versus I, and that what we are doing is through observership, transforming something that is a higher dimensional, ooh, it's loud outside, sorry, good girl, Chicky didn't bark, let's give her a treat because she didn't bark at the motorcycles. She hates motorcycles. We're not just seeing, there we go, we're not just seeing something that is, what we're looking at is not, how can I say this with the right words? I want to say what we're looking at is something that's not actually there. We look at something that is actually there, the fifth dimension and higher. We put it through our system of interpretation and perception that tells us we're sitting in a room and experiencing time, okay? So that's one of the first things. So I versus I, in order to render the world around us. And I'm also going to talk about the optical phenomenon of persistence of vision. But there's also other aspects of the actual apparatus of our eye in the way that we perceive light. So on our retina, this is the lens of your eye over here. On the back part of your eye over here, you've got, you know, this sensitive area that's the retina. It's like where the photo paper goes. No one uses film cameras anymore. I don't know what to do. It's like where your pixels are in your digital camera. So that's the sensitive area that actually picks up light. And I need to drink more water, I'm sorry. That area of your body works on contrast. The retina works on contrast. So if you're looking at my face, you know, in this, on this screen, you know, you've got the edge of my face over here. That's light, stimulation of color on your retina. And you've got this area over here that is dark. That is less stimulation on your retina. And each one of us with our eyes is drawing a line here of saying, oh, face versus not face, face versus not face. And we do this all over. We'll do like shoulder versus not shoulder, painting versus wall, sculpture versus window. And versus, this is the word of duality. You know, like Merriweather versus Smith, and they're going to fight it out. Versus thing against thing. And this is duality. And when I'm talking about flying rainbow lasagna, we're talking about how do we transcend duality? How do we get past that programmed in aspect of self that says there's this thing and then there's this thing? Because it's not by accident that we have all of these dualistic oppositions in our world. Light versus dark, like here I'm pointing at light in the window, and then here I'm pointing at shadow underneath the table. Light versus dark, this is how we built a picture of the world. Also in terms of characteristics, you know, light or positive or benevolent personality characteristics versus dark, malevolent, evil personality characteristics. Light versus dark. All these other thing versus thing. Self versus context. This is a big one, because we are, you know, we come here mostly as little infants and we're very connected to the rest of the cosmos. And then we begin to individuate, and our journey becomes a journey of the ego, where you say, my name is Sally, or my name is Johnny, or my name is Cheeky, and I'm this person, and I'm not any of you people. And that's a good part of the journey, but it's not the end of the journey. Like, we haven't actually reached the Italian restaurant yet. The end of the journey is when you get back to the understanding that, oh, we're actually all connected. And because we're so intimately connected, and, you know, there's no entangled, and there's no way to separate you apart from everyone else, we are all affecting one another. We can consider ourselves to be one totality. That's the return to totality consciousness. That's what we're doing as individuals. That's what we're doing as a species, as a planet. And to me, Flying Rainbow Lasagna is a tool for being able to do that. So self versus context. That's where you say, I'm this individual. I'm not all of human society, but really you as an individual embedded within human society, you are part of the same thing. So I'll get more into how to transcend duality with this, but first I want to define what is duality. And so this shape, because it is a jumping or an oscillation of that singularity, it makes it possible, if this is where a membrane is, or a separation, or something that says everything over here on this side is different than everything over here on this side. What if I make this purple dot jump back and forth really, really fast, really, really fast, really, really fast? And even with this camera, as I'm jumping back and forth really fast, it makes my pen look like it's blurry. And it almost looks like my pen is a different shape than just a regular, you know, like straight up and down pen. That is exactly what is happening in reality. And now we need to talk about this optical phenomenon that is called persistence of vision. So this is, and let's go to the whiteboard and I'll write it out for everyone. The whiteboard. Hold on, bear with me, bear with me. Go to the text. How do I do this? And write it out. Persistence of vision. Good, wonderful. That's different than the Salvador Dali painting called Persistence of Memory with the melted clocks. Persistence of vision. This is the phenomenon that allows us to watch a movie and see it like a movie, a film strip, you know, a film presentation, and have it appear as a series, as smooth movement through time, as opposed to a series of disconnected moments. So I drew this in level 1. If I say this is a film strip, I know it's a little hard for me to control my pen. Let me try it again. Let's say this is a old-fashioned film. So we're not talking about digital, because digital is different. The refresh rate and digital photography is different. But we're talking about, like, from the 20th century. This is how movies were originally done. A piece of film that's like a long linear tape that has individual frames on it, or this can also be considered animation. It's done in the same way. And we'll get into animation, old-fashioned animation. Each one of these frames is like a frozen moment. But, you know, when we watch a movie, if I'm in the movie theater, I'm watching a movie, I'm not like, oh, that's a frozen moment, that's a frozen moment, that's a frozen moment. Of course not. Because if this is my eyeball over here, we have this optical phenomenon that is known as persistence of vision that makes us tie together moment to moment. And this has to do with the rate at which these moments are flickered or presented in front of our eye. So the flicker rate for regular movies in the movie theater is 26 frames per second. Let's try to see if we can write this FPS, 26 frames per second. That means you have 1 second sliced up into 26 little microseconds slices that then our eyes blend together to make it look like there is seamless integration of movement. Now what I'm drawing over here is an old-fashioned form of animation that is called a zoetrope. Let's write it out because that one's a little bit hard to even know how it's spelled. Zoe meaning wheel of life, trope meaning wheel. It's a zoetrope. Here, go back to drawing. Zoetrope was old-fashioned animation. So what they would do, and this is again like around the time of the Renaissance in Western Europe, had a drum, so I just drew that cylinder, and it's kind of like on a spindle, so it can spin around in this direction, and it has slits or apertures that are cut in the outside of it at very regular intervals. And you take a film strip, just like one of these guys up here, and each cell of the film strip or still shot of you put it inside of the drum over here where I'm drawing that arrow. And it's just like an it's like a flip book. If you ever did that with your math textbook, instead of studying the math in the class, you know, if you drew in the margins, you know, you might draw like a little stick figure and his arm is up in one frame, and then the stick figure guy, his arm might be like this in the next frame, and then in the next frame, his arm is sticking out like this, and then when you flip the book, it actually looks like his arm is moving up and down. This is exactly what the zoetrope or wheel of life did, and it was considered to be magical. And it has to do with this phenomenon of our perception that is persistence of vision. That basically means your brain and your system of perception blend together different still shots, different moments. This is one moment, and then this is another moment. It is you. Just like you got ovens in front of your eyes, you have this magical ability to animate still dead, frozen stuff. Remember, something that's moving through time is alive. Something that is not moving through time is not alive. You literally animate or give spirit or life or movement or breath to something with your perception. So with zoetrope, the cylinder was spun around in a circle, and as it was spinning around, the little slits in the side, they make kind of like a flickering, very similar to, you know, the movies flickering at the right rate. And then your mind and your brain and your system of perception do the rest of the work. Just drinking more water. To be able to determine that you have movement. I'll go back to my face. Hold on a minute here. So now let's talk about your chakras. Hey there. Boss is being really well behaved over here. Your chakras are spinning wheels of time. These are exactly like the zoetrope cylinders. And what we're doing with these spinning chakras or wheels of time is time is just like the still frames of a movie. It's separated into little frozen moments, is the best way I can describe it, that are separated like 26 frames per second is what we do in film. But in time, what we're experiencing is separation at the Planck length. Planck is, you know, one of these very well-known physicists of the 20th century. And it was the idea of, you know, if you're chopping up a pie or a cake, like you chop it into slices, smaller slices, even smaller, even thinner slices, thinner, thinner, thinner. How thin can you slice a piece of cake and still call the little slice that you've got cake? And how thin can you slice time and still have that little super micro slice of time be called time and not just be like a molecule or like, you know, an atom or a little piece of chocolate that's not even cake. So we have moments of time separated at the Planck length, and it is the spinning wheel of energy, or many spinning wheels of energy that are in front of us, that cause us to perceive the world around us. I'm just going to images so you can see this. Go to my desktop here. Go to this picture over here, or this picture over here. Here's two good examples, and I hope you can see them both effectively. These are images of the zoetropes, or chakras, or spinning wheels of time that surround and interpenetrate each one of us on the anthropomorphic level. And when I use that word anthropomorphic, it just means human-centered or human-formed. So you see there's one head, there's two arms, there's two legs. You're like, hey, that's a person. Like, yes, that is a person. And all the other stuff that's around those people is also the person. And so this is about separating the observer from the observed. You know, all of this stuff that's around you is you, and this is also you. So that separation that we learn in infancy, this is me and that's not me. I'm me, you're not me. This is me, this is the world. That becomes rendered moot, or a descriptive term that doesn't even make sense anymore when we begin to understand that we are intimately connected with and affecting our environment just by observership. So here's a very biological way of looking at and understanding this. Each one of us has on our skin fungi and yeasts and microbes. It's not disgusting. It's beautiful. You're a fantastic work of art, and it's the way we're supposed to be. And when I'm out in my garden, like sitting on my little garden chair, looking at my beautiful plants, and I don't have my shoes on, my big toe, there are literally 90 different types of fungi alone that exist on our big toe. Science has literally put money into investigating this, and I'm happy to share it with you. And there's something like there's like 200 types of fungi that live just on the heel of your foot. Like there's an enormous amount of the diversity of life that just lives on your epidermis, on your big toe. And the soil surface also has fungi and microbes and all sorts of wonderful forms of life. So when I'm sitting on this planet and my big toe is touching the garden, there's literally no distinction between me, the fungi on my big toe, the fungi on the soil surface, and the planet that I am interacting with, sitting upon, that is nourishing me, that is the body that I'm living on. There's no distinction. There's no difference between those two things. Even though, of course, at earlier levels in our development, we make a distinction. Well, I'm me and the planet is different from me. But really, when we look at it, all of the molecules that are in my lungs that are, oxygen and carbon dioxide are all connected to all of the molecules that are out here in the atmosphere and that go very far away and that connect with everybody else. My lungs are actually connected to all of your guys' lungs. So what is happening is an intellectual or a thought-based understanding of connectivity as opposed to division. Remember, I versus I, self versus context, light versus dark, all these things in opposition. But what we start to do with consciousness, just like with perspective or with any of these higher, more sophisticated levels of interpreting the world, is we start to understand that we are intimately connected with our environment, intimately connected with everyone else. And that's just in time. Like in this moment, my lungs are connected to everyone else that's on this planet, but you're connected to much more than just this moment. Through these time field, drawings and diagrams, we understand we're connected over time. Across time, many different lives or lifetimes or individuated experiences are all connected. And then all of these individual experiences converge at the central convergence point. So that, hold on a second. Transcending duality, that central convergence point here, this is the singularity, and I spoke about this last week. And the way that this format of both your energy field, your time field, possibilities and probabilities, and your DNA transforms into a higher dimensional version with an expanded number of degrees of freedom, or things that you can do, is by taking that singularity, that central convergence point, the 0th dimension, and making it jump up and down very, very fast. And as it's jumping up and down, or jumping back and forth, or jumping in and out, it's the X, Y, and the Z axis, it is leaving an energetic wake behind it. Just like a jet plane flying through the air or a boat going across the surface of water, consciousness across time, the medium of time, leaves ripples in its wake or perturbations. Just like if you have water, the medium is water, and the ocean-going vessel is leaving trails behind it as it goes across the water. We're traveling through time. We are consciousness traveling through time. As we travel through time, we create these waves behind us. And they're also, we should say, ripples. And those ripples not only extend behind us into the past, they also extend into the future. And this is also, as a brief aside, this is why when we perform or experience profound healing in our own bodies, in our own lives, in our own genetics, it's like dropping a pebble onto the surface of a pond, and it spreads ripples through time into the past and into the future. So if I am healed in this moment, it definitely affects my future, everything that I send forward, everything that I will experience, everything that I'm sending out to the future. And it also reverberates into the past, into ancestors, into previous experiences within this lifetime, into previous experiences, into previous lifetimes. Because remember, if we're looking down the time tunnel, I'm just the present slice. And there's all of these other slices in the French bread moving backwards. So this is why it is so profound. If each one of us is healed in this generation now, we send that reverberation of healing into the future. We also send that reverberation of healing into the past. This is the rectification of the time field. This is what I'm talking about all the time. Like, why does humanity have to bootstrap itself on up? What are the bad things that happen to us? Why are we in this position? Once we begin to be healed, all of that stuff becomes rectified. So this is, again, like the idea of having a pencil with an eraser where we can Erase the things we don't want to have experienced from the past. Erase the things we don't want to create in the future. And of course, create the, the most abundant and comfortable present moment now that we possibly can. So the oscillation of this singularity back and forth leaves a perturbation in its wake. Guys, I think it's time for me to share this animation that I have shared before. Let's do share screen, and let's do it. I hope this will work properly. I always cross my fingers. I'm like, come on, technology, do your stuff. Okay, and this is a visualization, an animation of how the jumping back and forth motion leaves vortices in its wake and creates as an end result the flying rainbow lasagna shape. We've got this jumping up and down, and each time, or back and forth, each time it jumps, it creates a wonderful vortex. And the jumping motion happens in this shape 8 times, and that is the flying rainbow lasagna. So I'll go back to my face now. Good, because an animation's worth a million words, so you got it. So whenever I share, in Woodstock for many years, I had this friend, I was always telling them flying rainbow lasagna. And then finally I showed them an animation. They were like, you've been talking about this for 5 years, and now I finally understand that it's a moving object. So yes, this is a moving object, and it's the end result of this oscillation back and forth. And as it oscillates, what it does is makes this boundary or separator permeable, where we have the inside connects with the outside, connects with the inside, connects with the outside. So no longer do we have like, oh, the inside, I'm different from my context, and that's the rest of the stuff that's not me. What you actually begin to find out is, wow, half the time stuff is inside of me and half the time stuff is outside of me. That's really, really different. It's a really different cosmology or story of narrative structure of reality. Where does reality come from? So science will give up this objective materialist viewpoint of like where reality comes from. Where does an object come from? Where does it come from? The truth is it comes from your mind. It comes from your system of perception. It comes from you using the ovens in front of your eyes in order to collapse the waveforms of reality and bake the dough of possibilities into the bread of actual life experience. So I have a wonderful video that is all about this. It's called Reality Creation, and where I liken this experience to making cookies in a cookie factory. And the cookies up until this point have been burnt cookies because humans have not been in control of their perception or the ovens in front of their eyes. And a lot of this has to do with time. So I say, like, imagine an industrial oven. And the industrial oven has like, they have like a conveyor belt that runs through the oven. And on that conveyor belt, you've got like cookie sheets. You put the cookies that are raw dough, you put the sheets, and each one of the cookies, it's got like, this is why we use that word cookie cutter. It's all the same shape, the same size, the same whatever. And the recipe in the giant industrial oven, bakery is, send those cookies through, 375 for 11 minutes. And, the industrial cookies, they don't really care if they get burnt. They don't really care if they're a little bit too crispy. They don't really care if, well, that one could have used 1 minute longer. That cookie could have used 1 minute less. So all of this has to do with perception of time and standardized time. So we're, again, in this world where having a clock is normal. Having a clock used to be like the biggest luxury. It used to be like only rich people owned grandfather clocks or, like pocket watches or something like that. And before then, no individual owned a clock. Clock was a public resource. It was, what was on like the church steeple or something like that. So having accurate time measurement is very new to our present level of society. And it's not necessarily a good thing, because what has happened is the standardization or cookie cutter experience of time. And not every moment is actually the same length. They're not all the same. So that's like saying, if I got a lump of dough, they're not all the same size. If I'm going to make these different lumps of dough that are different moments, like we know this subjectively, sometimes you're doing something that you really, really love, and time goes by so fast and so effortlessly. Like when I'm making my paintings, I'm like, time is flying by. The whole afternoon is gone. I love what I'm doing. Or whatever is when you're in your zone, when you're doing your blissful experience, time moves at a different rate than when you are like suffering or under extreme duress, like moments spent, whatever, having a root canal or stuck in traffic. Those are endless moments, like an endless agony. Like, oh my God, this is going so slowly. So time is subjective. The experience of time is subjective. Not all of these cookies are the same size. Some cookies are smaller, some cookies are fatter, some cookies are shaped like a swan. They have all sorts of different sizes and shapes to them. And what's supposed to happen is that each cookie is supposed to be baked in the oven according to its individual need. Like, you know, if one cookie is big and fat, it might need 11 minutes, but a little tiny cookie might only need 5 minutes. And this is how we don't get burnt cookies. Burnt cookies are like children born with brain cancer, or environmental degradation, or, you know, dolphins dying and whales dying of brain tumors and things like it's all the things in reality that we don't want to make. I know everyone in this class, no one wakes up in the morning and while they're brushing their teeth, they're like, oh, I want to use my imagination to imagine that babies are born with brain cancer or that whales are dying or any, like none of us want that in this world. And yet this is the reality that we are experiencing. So the only understanding that we can admit to is that the dough of our mind, you know, the imagination, the raw stuff of potential of reality is being consistently hijacked and taken away from us and subverted and turned into these industrial cookies that are just sent through the industrial cookie factory without the maker really caring about the experience of the eater. They don't care if they're burnt cookies. They don't care. It's like they're not eating them. They don't care if it's not delicious pastries. And we all care because we're actual consciousness. When you start to really see the interconnectedness of all of these aspects of the time field, all these timelines, all these time cones, it's all you. That's the real point. And I'm not trying to say hug and kiss a demon or hug and kiss people that are whatever meth heads or what, like some people are deeply, deeply troubled. So don't misapply, pardon me, this very basic truth that we are all connected and that what we do, what one does in terms of consciousness profoundly affects other people. It doesn't mean you give people a free pass or, you know, it's okay to kill or harm or mutilate or anything like that. Not at all. It does mean that we take personal responsibility for the fact that our imaginations are creating potential for experience. And somewhere along the line, our individual and collective imaginations are being subverted and misapplied or hijacked or hacked and being used to create or manifest a reality that is not our ideal reality, even either in terms of individual physical health. Like if each one of us was making artisan cookies, like I'm gonna make this cookie one at a time, I'm gonna put it through the oven, I'm gonna make sure it's perfectly cooked, none of us would have disease or any level of suffering or anything wrong in our lives. And yet I think it's pretty common to say almost everybody has some amount of pain or something that's not perfect in your life. So this is about how we use our perception to how we can become better athletes, train ourselves better. When I say train, like, you know, like practice in the gym, train ourselves better in terms of perception to be able to create custom cookies that are exactly what we each want to be experiencing in the world. So we can take a collective level of responsibility and say, yes, it's like if I took a little bit of dough from you, a little bit from you, a little bit from you, a little bit from you, and I put it into a patty, and that's the patty of, you know, people having brain cancer or the children eating out of a garbage heap or any of the things that we would consider to be negative social experiences that we don't really want to have happen. Something else is taking our stuff, our dough, and making something without our permission. But what if we're like, well, I'm going to start locking up my imagination. I'm going to start locking up my imagination dough. So no one else can get into the bakery. No one else can take my dough and use it for something else. And this is what Pedro's initial question in the level 1 stuff, it was really more of a level 2 question, but I'm totally happy, like it's a one-room schoolhouse. So the real answer is through personal encryption. And this is something that we do as we reach higher levels of sophistication. So we're all sophisticated enough to learn about and understand the necessity of doing this. And we're super sophisticated in terms of the cultural context that we are in right now. But in terms of, like, if we went back to Atlantis, the antediluvian world, you know, we'd be like learning at the level of kindergartners. Like they learn these Merkaba protection and personal encryption modalities, like we learn our ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, like this is how you learn to protect yourself. So yeah, we all need to become experts at this level of protecting our own resources of imagination, that no one else shall hijack our imagination and our dance of our DNA. So anxiety, like this is a perfect example of something else coming along and hijacking and subverting the individual imagination. If I'm like having a great time, I'm doing whatever I want to do, and all of a sudden, like sometimes this happens when I'm out, you know, I'm doing something, I'm having loads of fun, and all of a sudden I think, wait a minute, did I turn the stove off? Like, I'm sure we've all had something similar. Did I lock the front door? And it's like, no, like you did everything just fine. This is an intrusive thought that is trying to basically take you out of the moment and take you out of that sense of being blissful and being embedded in the moment now, and make you worried about something else. You're worried like, will I come home and find that my house is burned down? Like, will I come home and find that a burglar has broken in? It's imagining realities you don't want. It's taking the imagination raw dough of your mind and putting it into industrial ovens that someone else is calibrating and making them come out as burnt cookies. So it's very harsh to say, like, everybody who has burnt cookies, you must take responsibility for it, because in a lot of ways, humanity has been burgled. You know, humanity has had like consciousness burglars, intruders, people stealing from us almost the whole entire time that we've been in existence. And it's very challenging when you're constantly being intruded upon and burgled to even learn about these levels of violation, and much less, you know, to fight against them. So no blame the victim mentality here. And really the end result, the solution is each one of us becomes more sophisticated, develops energetic firewalls, guards our energy of imagination, and begins to manifest the realities we wish to manifest. Because again, this is a shape that represents the inside becoming manifested as the outside. Your inner realm of imagination, I keep using that word, envisionment, what you see that's not actually there in the physical realm. If I ask everybody, what you using your mind, like imagine a purple muffin, then you're all using the paintbrush of your mind to paint a purple muffin. It doesn't actually exist. It's not here in the room. None of us can actually look at it with our physical eyes. But what you can do is look at it with your inner vision and imagine it with your imagination. So if you imagine the worst, like, oh, my house is going to burn down because I left the stove on, and that is what you are painting with your mind. So it is essential, like especially as, and I'll get to that question, we are now entering what I call a very fertile area of the time field. So the time field, this is like the overarching trajectory that we've been going through as a planet, as a human species for a very long time. For a long time, it was like winter time. Everything was frozen. You couldn't plant a seed. You couldn't make something happen. Even if you tried really, really hard with all of your might, be like, I really, really, really am imagining blah, blah, blah thing happen. It ain't gonna happen because it was winter time. Now we're entering into a fertile time of the time field, where if you think with your mind, you are planting seeds that actually can grow. So this is what it means to take responsibility. Instead of being like, it's hopeless, we'll never be in charge of our own lives, there's overlords of humanity, all is lost, abandon hope, all you enter here. Like that is, if you plant that seed, the reality you will experience. Now there is the opportunity to plant the seed of transcendence and superseding limitations and personal freedom and flying rainbow lasagna. Like, this is my symbol and my tool for being able to do this. It's not that, you know, there's many different ways that we can do this. So it's all a synergy that adds up from many different directions. So yes, now you can plant seeds. Now you can plant a seed that says, hey, we don't have to be ruled by a corrupt government. Hey, we can plant a seed that's like, hey, we don't have to be subverted and, you know, live in a capitalistic society where some people have a mansion with a golden toilet and some people are eating out of the garbage. Like, we don't have to have that. That's the hijacking of the dough of your mind and the burnt cookies. We don't have to accept that. And that's a big thing as we begin to recalibrate, to ask yourself, like, why do I accept that as a basic level of reality? I don't accept that. The truth is our economy is horribly mismanaged, and that's why there's so much iniquity. And if it were better managed, many, many more people could have a mansion with a golden toilet if they wanted one. Yeah, it's not just inherent in the economy that somebody has to be poor for somebody else to be rich. So Pedro is, wait, okay, questions. Pedro says, in the plane of timelines in the fifth dimension, the same as the timelines that hit the death membrane and the ascension timeline. I'm trying to think of how best I can answer that. I would say yes. Even though, yeah, yes. If we could say that the plane of the fifth dimension would be analogous to this membrane here, this membrane between worlds. But remember that this membrane has been distorted by the occupiers of the interstices, and also through flying rainbow lasagna, the vibrating of this membrane in a higher dimensional state, what we can do is rearrange that membrane. So that's what that is. Like when I was talking about changing the course of a river that once was going like this, but then it made a C curve and then it made an S curve. That's what we can do with the potentials for life and death of the fifth dimension and higher. So the next question is, Pedro says, imagination, check, add to the list of things to protect and encrypt. Absolutely. In fact, I would say if there is one vital body part to protect, you know, like you have to protect your heart, protect your head with a helmet, protecting one's imagination is very, it's like one of the first things we should protect, because that's what everything else comes from. The capacity to envision. When I say imagine, because I know that's one of these words that's been denigrated as like meaning not real. So perhaps instead of saying imagine, just say envision or visualize. That capacity to visualize with inner vision or higher dimensional perception is what makes it, it's like a paintbrush for reality. That is our paintbrush for reality. This is one of the most crucial aspects of anatomy, and it's why it's been so heavily perturbed and attacked in this time and place. So I don't have enough time in this presentation, but later on in the semester, I'll talk all about what I call non-religious Christ consciousness. So I wear a cross, but I am not a member of any church. And this area of our body where we envision, where the visions come from, that inner eye, it's Christ consciousness. And it's been heavily co-opted in this time and place. The whole story of, you know, what is promoted as the Christian religion, that whole narrative structure, and the idea of suffering being didactic and necessary, and the idea of having to die in order to live forever and not die. All of these things, I mean, not only is it illogical, but it's a hijacking of the inner capacity to imagine or envision. This is the stealing of the dough. This is how they steal your dough. They steal your dough through religious stories and through cosmology. Science is another form of religion, in my opinion. Like, it is a similar control system that is based on belief. You know, you have to believe in blah, blah, blah. You believe in the structure of reality. And because of blah, 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 you're not allowed to do what you really want to do. So in a religious-based time, it was like, God will punish you. You're not allowed to do what you want to do. Now it's like, oh, no, the rules of science say it is not possible or it is not allowed. Yes, everything is emitted from our imagination. And when I say the rules of science say it's not allowed, Flying Rainbow Lasagna, we're in a new world. And new world is not like New World Order. I mean a realm of new possibilities. This is what I mean, like a new area of fertility in terms of the time field. Or it's like if you're a woman, like it was not the right time. You were not fertile to be able to conceive a baby. That no matter how hard you tried in that other time, you could not successfully conceive a child. But now you can actually conceive. But if you still keep thinking like, oh, it'll never work, never worked in the past, that will be the reality you will paint with your imagination or with your ability to envision. So part of it is we need to, like, I'm getting like Windex, we need to clean this lens, spray, 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 clean it off, so that we're not looking through this cultural conditioning of religious programming and social expectations, and where we're actually able, as we are miniature divine creators, like little fractals of God. That's where this ability to imagine comes from. And imagine can be like, oh, like I'm imagining a new song, or maybe I'm envisioning a new art form, or maybe I'm envisioning a new form of food, like a new recipe of cookies, whatever it is. This is how new thoughts become born as matter in the world. It is through the conduit of imagination. We're imagining something new. So I always use that example of that silly movie. Don't even bother watching it, The Green Lantern. It's not worth watching. But in the movie, a regular guy becomes a superhero because they give him a magic ring, the ring of the Green Lantern. And then he can use his imagination to do whatever he wants. But he imagines really stupid, boring things like a gun. Like, I'm going to imagine a gun and then shoot my way out of this problem. It's like, that is not a very effective imagination tool. What if you imagined with your imagination ring 1,000,000 imagination rings, and you gave them out to lots and lots of cool people who all started to imagine expanded possibilities and solutions for their own lives and for humanity as a collective and the planet as a collective? That would be a way more interesting reality. That's Flying Rainbow Lasagna. This is the Green Lantern ring. I'm imagining that everybody gets one. Everybody's got an everlasting gobstopper. Everybody's got the tool that they need to transform reality and then go to it. Because also I'm the type of art teacher where it's like, I want to paint my own painting, but I also want to see what other people are painting. Or I want to jam, I want to play my music with then I want to see what's the drummer playing, or hear, you know, what's the singer singing. It all meshes together. I don't want to be just the only person imagining reality, because I think in many ways that would be a weak system. Because then what if that one person that can write new songs can't, if they die or whatever, they're tired, if they get the flu, then there's no new songs. You got to have backups. You got to have a spare. You got to make sure that there's other beings out there that can take up the you know, whatever it is, making new ideas, making new songs, having new everythings. Okay, so one more question over here. Pedro says, got it. I just wanted to understand if there was a relation from your dimension drawings and the yellow time field. Yes, remember I said in those dimension drawings, I was drawing it like a flat plane, like here, this little thing is shaped like a flat plane, but that it really is curvilinear. These are what it's actually shaped like, but it's just a little bit easier for the building of the dimensions and using the examples if I draw them like flat squares and then show them stacking up. So the actual time field, it looks like my shirt, it looks like my paintings, it looks like a series of nested spheres, and those spheres, they almost look like a foamy soap bubbles put together. And if you cut the soap bubbles in half, then they would look like circles, like flat circles. And that's what a lot of my paintings over my shoulder, that's what you're looking at over here. If there are any more questions, I'm happy to answer more questions. If not, I'm going to end the recording just because it's going to be a bit of a long upload. But I want to give everybody a chance to speak, and also they're very good. Like, it ends up adding to the broadcast, and I think of what the audience looks at after the fact that isn't here actually live to do this. So if there are any more questions, I'm happy to get to them. So I think I covered a live territory today. It was actually very good. I'm going to end the recording. I'm going to say thank you to everybody who was part of level 1 and level 2. Thank you for doing the marathon. You're wonderful. Cheeky says thank you and hello to everyone. And please tune in next week. There we go. Wonderful. Okay. See you later.